Hi, and welcome back to Shop Talk, your monthly dose of inspiration for selling vintage and antiques online. I'm Nicole with my co-host Whitney. How are you, Whitney?
Hello, Nicole. Good to see you. I'm so excited for today.
I know, I am too. We have a special guest on today. We are going to be talking to Natasha Kennerley. But before we get started with our discussion with Natasha, we would like to graciously thank the small shops who sponsored this episode. We had two shops that we're going to shout out today. The first is Laura Snyder from the Snyder Collection. She has an Instagram. It's _Snyder, SNYDER_collection. She advertises her vintage goods that she sells in her booth space on her Instagram. She is located at the Barn in Lexington, Virginia. Her booth is full of beautiful home decor items ranging from primitive farmhouse to traditional chic, everything in between, beautifully curated. So if you're local to Lexington, Virginia, definitely check her out at the Barn.
Okay, and we also have Jill from Vintagey Goods. Jill is another Instagram seller. I always love that we get to have a visual for these sponsors because we're very lucky that they're on Instagram. We can go see your shop, see what you're posting. She also sells in a booth at Off the Common Antiques in Grafton, Massachusetts, and she specializes in cozy and nostalgic home decor. I love the pine pieces and the primitive neutrals that she had in her feed in her recent posts. Her Instagram account is Vintagey Goods, so that's V as in Victor, INTAGIE. So make sure you go and check out Jill and Laura. Thank them for sponsoring the podcast. And if you would like to sponsor as well and get a shout out, we appreciate that so much. You can look at the show notes for a link to our Buy Me a Coffee website and where you can donate. And then we get to share the love with you and with all of our audience.
Thank you so much, ladies, for sponsoring this episode. Now we would like to introduce our special guest. Natasha is someone that Whitney and I met in England in October when we went on our first buying trip together. We found her at an antique market and she invited us to a private shopping day with her in the Cotswolds and for tea in her home, and it was just an amazing day. My husband even still talks about it and how lovely she was and having tea and just chatting and everything. Like it was amazing. So Whitney and I are very happy to be able to continue our conversation with Natasha. So let's dive right in to the world of Natasha. Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much for inviting me on this. We had such a lovely day. It was lovely to meet both of you. And your very patient and hardworking husbands who were lifting and carrying and all of that sort of thing. It was lovely. It was lovely to show you around my bit of the Cotswolds, which I love very much.
Shout out to our husbands who worked very hard on this trip without any complaining. And they even enjoyed the antique stores that you took us to and the time in your home. So it's so funny how Instagram works because I think this is how I found your account. I was listening, this takes it a little bit back. I was listening to the Antiques Diva podcast, Tama Clark Haynes, and she had on Joe Roberts. So then I started following Joe Roberts. And then Joe posted some videos with this wonderful woman called Natasha, and they were having discussions. And I think at one point, too, I even sent a clip to Nicole and was like, this is goals. Like, I want to grow up to be these ladies. So then I started following Natasha and I said, okay, we're going to be in England at this time. I'm going to come and find you. And then I walk up to you at the stall. I think I hung around for a bit and you were talking to someone. And so I came back later and I was like, I'm Whitney. And you said, hello, will you come to my house for tea tomorrow? And I said, absolutely yes. So we felt very fortunate that even though Instagram can be a wild west, it can still bring people together with common interests.
I think it's fascinating what it can do. And if you had told me 2 or 3 years ago that I would be as passionate as I am about social media, I'd have just, well, you don't really know me. That's not my kind of thing. But I think it's absolutely marvellous. And how interesting that you found Joe, a great friend of mine, and you found the two of us just gently wittering away. That's wonderful that happened.
Yes, it made me think we want to hang out with her too.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's fun to hang out with. Yes.
So, Natasha, where are you located for anybody who is not familiar?
Right. I'm in Stow-on-the-Wold, which is the northern end of the Cotswolds, not far from Chipping Campden, which is the northmost edge of the Cotswolds. Now, what's happened is tourism because the Cotswolds is so sought after, tourism has sort of spread the boundaries of geographically what it is. But Stowe and Chipping Campden, the north edge of the Cotswolds, which goes right down towards Bath.
It's a beautiful area too. I think Whitney
Thank
and
you.
I were both like
Mhm.
jaws were
Our
just
faces
oh,
pressed against the window the
definitely as
entire
we were
time,
driving
just like,
by.
Yes, you did
it
look. You
really
looked
is.
when you followed me home, and you looked visibly not shaken, but delighted and shocked at having driven through the countryside. It was lovely to see.
It was so picturesque.
Yes, yes.
So, Natasha, how did you end up buying and selling antiques? Was there something that inspired you, or have you always been doing this?
Well, right, it goes back a long way. So I grew up in the very late 1950s, very late 90s, only just made it, and in the 1960s. And at that time, and I'm an only child as well, at that time, all the grown-ups were being very modern and very swinging London and swinging 60s and so forth, and getting rid of all the things that I love. And what I adored doing was going to my godparents' house and my aunt and uncle's house, who had lots and lots of things. And my lovely, lovely mum, who later became quite interested in antiques, at that point wasn't in the slightest bit interested. So it was enforced minimalism to me. At one point, we didn't have a lot of money either, but we had a 5-bedroom house on 3 stories in North Yorkshire. And I think we had 3 pictures in the entire house. And that to me is like visual torture. It's like being deprived because I have a really, really hungry eye. And so my bedroom was always filled up with little bits and pieces. And knowing that we'd be talking about some of this, I've got some bits here on my table next to me. And one of the first things that I can remember buying when I was about age 7, I've got him here in my hand, is this little tiny mouse he's easily 55 years old, and he's holding a little kernel of corn, which he's never eaten in all that time. So he must be quite hungry. And he's made of fur, and he's German. And I think he was probably made in the 1940s. Well, no, not the 1940s, 1950s. And I adored this little mouse, and I bought it with my pocket money. And I have had ever since, I've had a great weakness for these little animals. I try not to let my collections of things go over. I don't know what the number is that it goes over. So he now sits in a little diorama of other creatures that I've acquired over the years. And I've just brought a couple more. I've got other things to show you as well. This is a little dog that I bought a while ago at the Cornwall Antiques Market in Cirencester. And I picked him out because he's got the little sticker on the bottom that shows that he was made in Germany. I think my mouse had one of those stickers. And only this week, I actually bought another of these. And as I say, I'm not trying to acquire them desperately, but I bought a dachshund here, which is little German dachshund, because a very dear friend of mine, and you went to see her, Thatcher Wilkins at Found near Cirencester. Thatcher has a lovely little sausage dog called Lettuce. I've never really cared for dachshunds, but Lettuce is rather special. So I bought this because this is my version of Lettuce. So that was one of the first things that I ever bought. And then what happened was my aunt, when I was about 13 or so, I used to go and spend part of my school holidays, so summer holidays, Christmas, half terms, with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt was getting very interested, particularly in watercolours and Victorian watercolours. And she found a really willing accomplice in me. So we would go out, and she had a little green Volkswagen car. I don't know whether you know Volkswagen as a make in the US. And they call them in England, they call them Beetles, little Beetles. And I
Yeah.
christened our little frolics that we used to go on. I'd say we'd go beetling. So my Aunt
Oh,
Eileen and I would go beetling. And she would take me into antique shops in Stratford upon Avon and in Warwick, and we'd go into galleries. And that really lit the fire, and my interest started then.
wow.
That's so inspiring for me because my kids are about the same age. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter, and my son's 11. And that I feel like that 7 to 8-year-old age, you still have your imagination and your creativity is pretty unbridled, and so it almost feels magical finding that little mouse.
Yes.
So it makes me encouraged to keep bringing them along as much as possible to get
Mhm.
exposed to things and to share that love with them because you never know where it will take them in the future.
Well, that
No,
and
no,
especially
I
that
don't.
you still cherish it after all these years and you still yeah.
Yes, he's been with me. I can't tell you how many times I've moved. I've lived in London. I lived in different flats in London. I've lived in different places in the Cotswolds, and he has always been with me. And I was quite careful as a child, so he's in pretty much mint condition, really.
So special.
But is there a special, like, term for that type of, like, miniature like, a mini
They're German, and I think you'd probably find quite a few if you went and looked at online auction sites. And they're
Mhm.
very charming. But to me, one of the things I sort of started to hint at is I don't like to, I don't want my collection to be all one thing because I'm so
Mhm.
varied in the things that excite me. So I have small collections, actually quite large collections sometimes, of a certain thing. And I will somehow at some point I make a decision and I think, no, I'm not going to buy any more of those. So these little fur animals, decided I wasn't going to buy any more because they're getting too expensive and I've got probably, I don't know, 10 or 12. But then something comes along, it just makes you think, oh no, I've got to have that. So I do
Mhm.
break my own rules sometimes.
I think we all do. There's a certain limit that you have in your mind, and then sometimes you do have, like, that 1 or 2, those pieces that draw you in that you can't really say
Yes,
no to.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
What you brought you into selling antiques instead of just collecting them?
Well, I think that it's a natural progression. I think it's a well-worn path for a lot of people that you collect and you collect. And I mean, you've got a tiny hint behind me of how much I've got. And you've, of course, been and seen how much I've got. Even you run out of space, and so you've got to part with things. And the other thing is that when you first start to collect something, you buy something because it attracts you, and then you realize, well, there are various other versions of this thing, and you start to see that there are better versions, perhaps,
Mhm.
of the thing that you bought, or maybe you bought the most fabulous version of it without realizing it. And then you want to add to your collection and you want to upgrade. And I started doing just selling bits and pieces really quite late on because I didn't think that I was a dealer at all. It's only in the last very short period of time that I've started selling. Well, not, I don't sell full time, but selling with more purpose behind it. But it is the path of having been a collector, and then you've got to start to upgrade and strip out bits in your collection.
Mhm.
And I think being a collector of that specific thing also means that you have that specialist knowledge. That means when you're going to sell it, you understand it. You know its history. You can say why it's the best or an average specimen of that type of item. And you know what the market value is and its unique selling points and all that. So it is interesting to me when I talk to people who have been collectors of specific things who kind of fall backwards into it like you did, because you actually
Yeah.
bring a lot to the table as a dealer that for those of us who came into it from a different door, we have to work to build up that knowledge and
Mhm.
that specialist expertise.
You're making me smile, Whitney, because you said, you bring this knowledge to it and you say whether it's the best of a certain thing or average. Little tip here. You never say it's average. You never say, oh, I'm selling this terribly, terribly average piece that I've got. You're
I
always
mean,
selling the best.
yes. I mean, we know if it's average or not. We don't necessarily tell
Yes,
people. We can
yes,
say it's a
we
really
know.
good example.
Yes,
That's always a good one. It's a really good example of
yeah.
this specific type.
Mhm.
And so the other one that I like, I think dealers, and I've got to count myself in this these days, but I try not to do. Dealers have a real weaselly phrase that they say sometimes when they don't know how old something is. And if you say, well, what sort of age has it got? And they go, well, it's got some age. It's got some age. Oh, what does that mean? It basically means they haven't a clue. And it's much better in that instance. It's much better if you say, I haven't a clue, but isn't it fun? Isn't it wonderful?
Well,
Yes,
better to
I'm
be
laughing because
honest
I
too. 'Cause
Yes,
then you can
yes.
have some people that are, "Oh, it's an antique," and you look at them and you're like, "No, it's definitely not." But
No.
that's
I
And I
mean,
think some
no, go
go on,
ahead.
you I
I
was
was sorry, I was
what I was going to say, I think there's going to be an increasing problem in that I can see things that I would classify as being gift shop items that I can remember buying as new 30 years ago, and people are saying, "Oh, it's antique," and
Mhm.
or, "Oh, it's vintage." Well, I suppose it is vintage, and it's really difficult. I meant to get one onto the table to show you, and I forgot to get it out. About the 90s, I collected a series of straw houses that were made in China. Absolutely beautifully, beautifully made. And they made them for the American export market and for the UK market. And I just bought these little houses, and maybe I'll show you at some other time. And they were something like, yeah, I think they were £6.99 each. Exquisite architecture. And they had roofs that lift off, and they're a box.
Wow.
And they're gorgeous, absolutely lovely. And I've got them scattered around the house. And I remember going to an antique fair once, and the dealer, I looked at them and I went to pick it up, and he said, "Oh, yes, yes, it's some Napoleonic straw work." Now, the Napoleonic prisoners of war were known for their straw work and made marvelous things, and also used to make wonderful things of bone as well. And had it been Napoleonic straw work, and I understood why he thought it might be, had it been, it would have been a box that would have been worth about £500 or £600. And I don't think it's Napoleonic. And I went to lift the roof off. I thought he was going to have a heart attack because he thought I was going to damage
Mhm.
his thing, because he didn't know that it had got a roof that lifted off. And I lifted the roof off, and he said, "Well, I didn't know that it did that," and told him what it was and walked away. I mean, whether he actually then revised his price ticket, I don't know. But it's really difficult, and it's very difficult for people collecting these days to be able to recognize something that was made 40 or 50 years ago within my lifetime. Very difficult.
Yeah. I get this question a lot when it comes to quilts or, I mean, even ironstone. Train your eye through handling hundreds of it, thousands of pieces over time. And I'm certainly not even the most experienced, but people asked me a lot of times, how did you get to know quilts? How do you know how to date them? Just like off the top of your head, just looking at a picture. I was like, well, because I bought hundreds of quilts and I handled them and I went to look at
Yes.
them and I asked a lot of questions and read a lot of old books and talked to a lot of older people. And it's just through, there's no quick way to gain that knowledge and experience. And that's something I think,
Right.
especially in today's AI instant, Google lens it and you can immediately know everything. It's like, well, that can be like one tool in your toolkit, could be a starting point, but that is no substitute for hands-on experience of just training your eye and training your eye with the best. I see that a lot as well of just if you really want
Absolutely.
to understand something. This is why we go to my local museum. The Nelson Atkins Art Museum is huge. It's an amazing building, and they have a section dedicated to British pottery from the 1600s through the 1900s.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's great. It
Yeah.
has all the information on the plaques about who made it and when, what kind of glaze, what kind of earthenware, where it was found, what it was used. Everything you could want to know. And Nicole, you went to the Nelson with me, and she was laughing at me at some point because there was a stickly table, arts and crafts table in one of the rooms, and I had my phone out and I was trying to look underneath the table, trying not to touch it.
Good.
Luckily, the docents were not in the room, but I'm looking. She's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm trying to see what the sticker looks like or what it looks like underneath, because that way, when I see it in the wild, I know what it is. Because
Mm.
how else are we going to have, what is the standard that our eyes are comparing everything to? And it's like
Mhm.
keeping that standard really high is important, which is why for me going to England is so important, not just from an inventory standpoint, but also so I can see the best of the best and know what it is. And know, because I think there are certainly people that want to take advantage of others' ignorance. And there's a lot of people who really don't know, and they shortcut learning, and they just want to make a quick buck. They take a quick picture, Google Lens, that's what it is, slap a name on it, and they move on. They're not really doing their due diligence, and they just really don't know. So I have to know, though, it's my money. I bought enough bad things.
So have we all.
Yeah, it's just part of it, and
Yeah.
you
It's
learn and you
part of
move
it.
on.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think if you get a knowledgeable dealer, really love what they do, I think that they will. I've always found that they're really willing to share that knowledge with you. I think the days of protecting and guarding the knowledge closely has gone. Yeah, I've always found that they're very happy to share their knowledge. And if you're sitting there wide-eyed, just drinking it in, and you're absolutely right, you do have to look at the best of the best. Earlier in the year, some very dear friends of mine from Tennessee, Dave and Debbie Woodard, who are big on Instagram and have been friends of mine for 25 years. They come over and we go traveling together. And we were going over to some antique fairs over in the east of England. And we went into Cambridge to visit the Fitzwilliam Museum because they had an astonishing collection of early pottery. And of course, you can't touch it, but you can look at it and you can drink it in. But then the thing about the education, continuing education, is if you go to really good fairs, you can pick up the stuff and you can hold it, which you can't do in the museums. And then your fingertip you would have learned with the quilts, you'd have learned the softness of older material and all sorts of things like that. And with pottery, you can feel the glazes and the earthenware and the clay. And that's a really valuable education.
Yes, that's such a good point. So, if anyone is local, if anyone is in England or traveling to England and wants to see where your collections are for sale, where can they find you? Because you have two booths, right?
No, I have more. I'm in Durham House in Stow-on-the-Wold. I am also up the road is another lovely centre. You know, because of the staircase with the sword step, is Tudor House. I'm in both of those centres. I'm also in Station Mill, which is in Chipping Norton. And the final place where I am with my friend Joe Roberts is we have something called the Room at the Back in Prestine, which is just over into Wales. And it's a shop, it's a very old fashioned shop with a lot of heart in a little town which has got a great deal of heart and soul. And it belongs to a friend of ours called Jules Brisbane, who is the organizer of Antiques Intense, which is an antiques fair which happens twice a year in May and in October. And the dealers who go there to sell and to buy love it, absolutely love it. And Jules owns the shop in Prestine, and she has a room at the back. And Joe and she approached her about 18 months ago. For various reasons, she wanted to sort of sublet the room at the back. And she came to see Joe and I at Mold. And we're standing having a chat, and Jules comes up and she said, I'm just thinking about Courtyard Antiques, and I'm just wondering, would you be interested? And she got as far as that, and Joe and I both went, yes, yeah, whatever you're suggesting, yes, 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 we'll do it. Yeah. And so we're in the room at the back there, and that gives me floor space, which I don't have in the other three centres because they're cabinets only.
Wow. Maybe we'll
Oh,
have to
but
check
thank
those
you.
other ones out
Oh,
next
yes. Yeah.
time.
Well, I really encourage you to come over to Antiques Intense. It's a very special fair. It's really marvellous. It's a marquee. It's got about 50 dealers in the main marquee, and it's in an area of the borderland between England and Wales, which is called the Welsh Marches. And it's so pretty. It's so pretty in the spring. It's so pretty in the autumn. And it's in the grounds of, I suppose, a minor, very minor little stately home. And that we have a few more dealers up in the house, and there's lovely things to eat and everything. But the whole point is that Jules, who runs the fair, who owns Courtyard Antique, curate the dealers in the tents very, very carefully. And once you get a place, I would say 80% of the dealers stay, and that's it. They book in fair after fair.
Barely missed it when we were in England in October. It was the last day that we were the last full
I
day in
remember.
England, and it
Yeah,
was just like a 3-hour drive. It's like, I just can't.
yeah, I know.
I mean, we were packed up. We spent all day, my husband and I spent all day packing our suitcases with all of the stock we had found. So it's definitely on my list for a future trip, I think, to England.
Mhm.
I'm just going to do, it's a Friday evening here. It's dark and it's blowing a hoolie outside with rain. And I've just got a glass of wine that I'm gently sipping. So just in case people wonder. So cheers to anybody who's watching.
I wish we were there with
Yes,
you.
seriously.
Trust
Well, that's
me.
the perfect segue to my next question because it is a
Ah,
Friday and you do a reel that you post on your Instagram
yes,
account called Friday Foraging. Would you like to talk a
I
little bit about
do.
that?
I would love to. You are sweet to ask. So about 25 years ago, it would have been 1990. I had a great friend, now dead, who was an American dealer and calligrapher and writer called Mark Drogan. And Mark and I met through antiques. In actual fact, it was a strange meeting. I might get round to that in a moment. But Mark and I met, and he divided his time between Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Tottenham, which is a village near Morton in Mark. And he introduced me to the Cirencester Cornwall Antiques Market. And at that time, there was still a thing with dealers where they kept their saucers very close to their chest. Some of us still do a little bit, but I think those days have gone. I think we've got to be much more open and generous with sharing and not just think, oh, this is my private antiques fair and I'm going to go there and not tell anybody about it. So Mark shared this fair with me and I started to go. And to begin with, thought that somebody was going to stop me. I used to turn up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I thought somebody would say, "You're not a dealer. What are you doing here? This is just for dealers only." But nobody seemed to care. And I started to go, and I have been utterly hooked on it ever since. And I go every Friday morning. We had a period, I think it was before lockdown, about 6 years before lockdown. The man who was then running used to come quite early to set the tables up and do various things. And he would open the doors, and we would try to get there when he opened the doors, which was 4 o'clock in the morning. And we would get up in the dark at four. Well, I would get up and drive. It's about a 45-minute drive for me. And we get there and we pounce on everybody who was unpacking. And I would get home sometimes at sort of 9 o'clock in the morning and go straight back to bed because I'd been up half the night. But now it's much more open and relaxed, and the doors open, well, as far as relaxed as these things can be. The doors open at 7 o'clock, and I go there and I post the things that I buy. So two of the things that I bought, I've already done my Friday foraging post, but I'm just going to pick a couple of the things that I bought this morning. I bought a pair of these candlesticks, which are Spode candlesticks. They're the kind of thing that I would have bought for myself when I was in my 20s, because I just think they're so pretty. They're not really me now. I don't buy such pretty things. They've got damage, and I normally say don't buy things that are damaged, but they have got damage, and they're probably about 1960s, this pair of candlesticks. So that was me foraging. It was just about light when I found those this morning. And then the other thing that I found, which I found after we'd been for coffee. So I go for coffee with friends. And this is a piece of passementerie. And passementerie is decorative tassels and cords and various things. I think this might be an acorn. I think it might have hung from a pelmet, a curtain pelmet. I'm guessing, and this plays to your point, Whitney, about knowing the age by just having been around it, touching it. I think that's 18th century. I'd be happy with saying it was 18th century. I have a very knowledgeable friend who you can find on Instagram called Sally Eade, who is a textile dealer, and another great textile dealer. There are a couple, Tom and Belle Strutt, are Well Walk Antiques on Instagram. And I must show it to both Sally and to Tom and Belle because they will recognize it. This would have been, I think this is silver. This would all have been silver. And you've got some raspberry colored damask in there. I don't know what it's built round. Very often they were built round wooden forms. This has got a slightly softer, squishier thing. But I found that this morning for £10, and I think that's just gorgeous,
Wow.
gorgeous. So that's what I do, and that was on my Friday foraging again. And that I was just walking back through the hall on my way to the car, and a dealer that I know, "Ooh, I've got something that might be you," and she produced it. So absolutely, why?
That's amazing. That's
I have this
another tip
running.
on getting to know some dealers that are local to you is then they'll find things and think of you. So like
Oh
Natasha
yeah.
said, he pulled her aside and said, "Oh, I have something for you."
Yes, yes. Oh, yes, I have several dealer friends who will say, "Just come over here and have a look at this." And so, yes, if you're, it is a good tip. Make friends with some dealers, and if you buy a few bits and pieces, you can bet the next time you go and they see you coming in, they'll think, "Oh, you might just like this."
Because we do the same thing with our own customers. We get to know their tastes, the things that they're looking for, the very specific. I'm not the best at remembering all the requests. I try to keep a running list in my phone of this person is looking for these pieces. But if it's a customer that comes back again and again, then we definitely become good at knowing exactly what they
Yes.
want. And then it just makes that relationship so special because
Mhm.
that customer knows, like, oh my goodness, she's thinking of me. She knew I would like this.
Mm,
And so it's interesting how it's all along the food chain of antiques from someone's attic to the end consumer. It's all about relationships and networking. It's very old school, which I
yeah.
personally really love.
Me too.
I love it. I love it. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, and because I have very diverse taste, and I buy things that are frankly just bonkers. Do you say bonkers in the US?
Yeah.
Or is that, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just buy bonkers things, and people will come in and they'll say, "Oh, I thought you might like this." I end up buying some huge. The last bonkers thing I bought was a huge metal ball that you opened up stomach had got a lid and you could use it to put wine bottles in. And I'd buy it, and only after I bought it and got it into my very small car, which you see with difficulty, do I suddenly think, oh, hang on a second, I've only got a cabinet. It's not going to fit in the cabinet in Durham House or Tudor House or Station Mill. And that's quite challenging sometimes because I forget. And the other thing that I have been known to do, I was at Malvern one day and I got so excited, and Joe and I had been whizzing round, and I went and I found a bird cage that was as tall as I am. It was just beautiful, and it was the right sort of money. And I thought, I've got to have that. I've got to take it to Antiques Intense. And the men who owned the birdcage carried it back down to my stall. And everybody, all my friends, because we sort of three of us, so Joe's there normally, she hasn't been well at the moment. Joe's there, then my friend Momo is there, and my friend Jill, and we're all there. And they're looking at me and saying, well, where are you going to put that? It's bigger than your car. And I suddenly think, oh, yes, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? But then I find somebody, in actual fact, this was Jules, who's Antiques Intense, and she put it and she took it to the fair. It didn't sell at Antiques Intense. And I'm still there thinking, and I got a bigger van at that point with my friend Lizzie. But still, this birdcage was huge. And friends took it back to the shop in Prestine, Courtyard Antique, and it sold and it went to America. And Jules is still dining out on the fact that I bought this birdcage and I sold, and I never once touched.
That is that is just classic dealer level. I mean, I've had several people tell me it's like, I never even had I took a picture, I sent the picture to someone,
Yeah,
their shipper
yeah,
came and picked it up. I
yeah.
never even put it in my car. I'm like,
Oh,
that is
that's
I
a
w
height I can aspire to.
But
Yes,
those are
that's
the best
fantastic.
kinds of sales, aren't they?
oh
Yes, they
man,
are.
That's
Yeah,
so funny.
really,
I
really
do
is.
get caught up in
yeah.
the moment too. When we were in England, Whitney and I, when we were, I forget which fair it was, but I saw a French truck and I said, "Oh, it was the great price. I could definitely do something with resale for that." And I grabbed it. I was all excited. And then we realized that it doesn't fit in a suitcase. So I
No.
tried to bring it home. It wasn't very successful. There was some damage, but I'm going to try to like mend it and then I'll probably just keep it for myself. But sometimes you do get caught up. You don't think about logistics.
I totally get caught. And so these friends of mine in Tennessee, in Springfield, Dave and Debbie Wood, I took some photographs at a fair. They saw a painted marriage box that was about this big with a slightly domed lid. So I don't, yeah, my hands are out of the screen. And they said, "Oh, we love it. We love it. Will it fit into a suitcase?" And sometimes my spatial awareness is a bit off. And I said, "Yes, yeah, oh, yes, it'll fit into a suitcase." So, and it wasn't cheap, by the by. And they bought it. I paid the dealer for it. They paid me, and I had it. I have a space in my bedroom upstairs, which is dedicated to housing things for Dave and Debbie and two other dear friends of mine in Connecticut, Massachusetts border, John and Jan Maggs. They deal actually quite often in jewelry and smaller things, so they're more easily accommodated. But Dave and Debbie go for slightly bigger things. So bought this beautiful, really beautiful painted marriage box, and they came over in the spring. And Dave looked at it, and they've got they're lovely Southern accent. When they're talking to me, my name has more R's in it than I'm used to. So instead of it being Natasha, it's Natasha. So, and it's Natasha. This is not going to fit. This is not going to go in the suitcase. And they tried every which way to get it into the suitcase, and we couldn't work it out. And their suitcases were like yours would have been, packed to the gunnels with things. And finally, and they're a bit distraught, they have to leave this because it can't go into the suitcase. And we've been together off and on for about 2 weeks, and they're doing one last trip over to see some friends somewhere else, and then they're going off to Heathrow to fly back to Tennessee. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and I come downstairs to make a cup of tea. Something sort of niggles at, and I go back and I look at the box, and what's basically going to have to happen is I'm probably going to have to buy it from them. Not that they would have made me do it, but they're not going to be able to get it home. And I look at it and I open it and I suddenly think, well, why don't we just unscrew the hinges and take the lid off? And so I sent them an emergency email at 4 o'clock in the morning saying, "Do not go to Heathrow. This will fit in your suitcase." And they ended up driving back, and we had all of their suitcases in my drive. By this time, I'd taken the lid off, and yes, it fitted, and it was.
That's like that moment when like the light bulb goes off.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm sure they were praising you for thinking
That
of
has
that.
to be the most like pro dealer move too. I'm gonna remember that for stuff like if there is a hinge and it will unscrew,
Unscrew
it
it.
can fit.
Right.
Very
Okay.
So I'm also going to tell you about the time that it really didn't work for me. A friend sent me a photograph of a small sedan chair, and I love sedan chairs. I'd love to have a full-size sedan chair, and it was a painted Indian wedding sedan chair. And in my mind, it was about this big. To the point that I was thinking, it was at auction, and I was thinking, I think it would fit into my cabinet in Durham House on the top shelf. I think it will go. And I bought it. And I was a bit disappointed because I paid £200, which was including fees and so forth. And I'd really hoped I could get it for a bit less than that. And I went to collect it. And I went into the auction house and I paid and all this kind of thing. I said, I've come to collect the sedan chair. And they said, have you got your car? And I said, yes. And they said, is it a big car? And I thought, that's a bit personal, isn't it, really? And I said, ish. Well, of course it's not. It's quite a small car. I said, ish. And they said, oh, well, would you like a hand with it? And I mean, this is something that's about this big. And I said, honestly, just because my hair has gone silver, they think I'm this little pathetic old lady and so forth. But then something began to dawn in the brain. The cell switched on. And I think perhaps I ought to have a look at this, oughtn't I? And we think you should. And they took me through into this room. And I swore, which I won't, but I swore quite loudly, which made them laugh. It was so big, I could rest my elbow on the top of it. It was square. It was about 4 foot square, and it was meant to hold 2 people with 4 men carrying it in an Indian wedding ceremony. So I look at, and so the first thing is it's clearly not going to fit in the car. I mean, I'm laughing at myself because it was such a stupid thing to do. And they give me a quote. One of the shipper guys is there. He gives me a quote of, I don't know, £100 to bring it to my house. And I drive away, and I drive about 30 miles, and I'm going back through Woodstock, and I am laughing. I am crying with laughter at this huge sedan chair. By Woodstock, sense had dawned, and I pulled over and I rang them and I said, will you put it back in auction? Because not only was it enormous, it was square. It wouldn't have fit through any door known to an English house. It was just so enormous. And there is a happy ending to this, because I was resigned to the fact that I was going to lose money hand over fist over this huge thing that was not going to fit into my cabin. And they put it into the auction, and I think I made about £25 on it, actually. So I sold it for a profit.
If you're only listening to this, Nicole and I both had to mute our microphones because we're laughing so hard, and you wouldn't have been able to hear
Well,
this.
it's not at you either.
Natasha's
It's like because I've gone through an experience where at auction, I mean, even ordering things from the UK, because we have like inches and feet here and you guys have the metric system. So it's like just even looking, I'm like, oh, okay, it's like this big. All right, that's about this much. Or like
Yes.
looking at an online auction, I'm like, oh, okay, it's like this big. Mind you, I work in architecture, so I should know scale of things, but I don't even look at the measurements sometimes.
Nope.
And then there've been quite a few pieces that I've bought on an online auction, and I go to pick it up and it's just far too big. And a couple of times I had to just kind of like leave it behind. But other times the husband's not too happy when he has to bring this giant dresser home, and he's like, what the heck are we doing with this? And I was like, I thought it was going to fit in the coffee bar and it's way too big.
When I posted that story of this sedan chair on my Instagram page, and a lady somewhere in America, I don't think I could find her if I wanted to, she sent me a thing, and she said that she'd gone to an auction and they had a marble tablet of a frieze of cherubs sporting, and she was sitting there and this thing came up, and she hadn't looked at it, she hadn't viewed, and the bidding just wasn't going anywhere, and she got it for about $20, and she thought, this is fantastic. So she went to pay and to collect it, expecting to be able, it's going to be a bit heavy, and she was going to be able to put it in her car. And they said, oh no, we'll bring it to the car for you. And it was about 4 foot by 3 foot. And she put it into the boot of her car. And this is where I love this woman. I hope she resurfaces at some point. She put it into the boot of her car. She couldn't get it out because it was so heavy. She was embarrassed. I don't think she told her husband about it. And she drove that car for 10 years with this in her boot. And it had got things. Yes, I know. I could see that you're laughing. She had got things that she put on top of it. And when I said, well, please could I have a photograph of this, because this is unbelievable, she came back to me and she said, well, it's a bit of an archaeological expedition to do this. I've got to go down through these layers to get to it. And you could see these layers of things that she'd put. And there was the marble thing. I mean, imagine the amount that added to her gas bill for filling the car, for carrying this huge
Oh my
marble.
gosh. I mean, I thought I was really bad about, not wanting to deal with problems, not wanting to admit a mistake, but that takes it to a whole nother level.
10 years?
Totally. 10 years. 10
They
years.
were like, why are your tires wearing out so fast, honey? I don't know. Let me look in the boot. Don't go there. Whatever you do. Oh my gosh. I mean, and it can go the opposite direction too. I remember in Drew Pritchard's book about how to not be an antique stealer. This is a great example. He got into a bidding war because he saw a picture and he thought it was these like life-size brass heron statues, a pair. And he paid I don't even remember, £150. And he got in a bidding war a bit with someone. And then he walks in and he tells it like this in the book. And he was like, I'm here to pick these up. They're worth, so much money. Look at me. And they hand them over like the 7-inch Taiwanese brass. He's like the kind that your gran had on the fireplace mantle.
Oh, wonderful.
He just looked at it and he's like, just, yep, what do you, I mean, didn't read the description, didn't look at the measurements, just saw the picture. And that happens to us too. You see what you want to see. I want,
Yeah.
and you see the bidding price and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a good deal. I'm going to make so much money on this. And it's so even, it happens even to the best.
So
Yes. Well,
funny.
if it's happened to yeah, I
It can,
suspect it's happened to all of yeah.
yes, it can definitely happen to me.
So, Natasha, you had talked a little bit earlier about the inspiration for your curated home and why you like to put visual inspiration around just to like make your home
I call it
aesthetically pleasing and curated.
I call it having a hungry
A
eye.
hungry eye, that's it. Thank you.
A hungry
I
eye.
couldn't remember. What are some of your favorite collections? Can you choose some or are there too many?
I can answer that in several ways, and I will answer it in a more satisfactory way by looking at some of the objects that I've put on my table here. But people very often say, "What is the favourite thing that you've bought?" Particularly then, or the favourite thing that you found at the Cornwall. And what I'm going to say unequivocally is the favourite thing that I have found at the Cornwall and in antique is friendship. I have found some of my best friends. I've mentioned Dave and Debbie, I've mentioned Jan and John. I've found great, great friendships, and that's the thing that really, really matters. However, that's not the answer that people want. People, yeah, the things. What are the things? So one of the favourite things that I ever found at the Cornhall is in my hands now. That in Staffordshire in the 18th century, they started to make enamel boxes, and they were snuff boxes, or they held patches for women to put on their face as decoration. And they are beautiful. They are naive art, and they're also incredibly skilled pieces of art. And they were built as imitation for poorer people to sort of copy the nobility who would have had a diamond encrusted box holding snuff or whatever, and would have said, "Oh, Whitney, would you care for a quick pinch of snuff?" and so forth. So these snuff boxes and various other things were made in Staffordshire. And about 20 years ago, I yearned for some Bilston boxes
Bills.
because they were so, so beautiful. And I was standing at the table in Cirencester, and I spied in the bubble wrap, I spied some eyes through a piece of bubble wrap. And I just was so excited by what the eyes were. And I asked the dealer, could I see what it is? And everybody, this particular dealer, still to this day, you you get your place at that table and you do not move while this dealer is unpacking because he has amazing things. So she handed me this, which she put into my hand. And I couldn't believe it. And I just went like that because it was so extraordinary. And all the other dealers round the table, when this appeared, everybody else went quiet and they all started behaving in a slightly furtive manner, rather than pretending not to be in the slightest bit interest, but really hoping I was going to go out and put it down. And at that point, your brain can't add up quickly enough what it is that you know and what it is that you've got. And I just thought, this is extraordinary. And I don't care if it's made in China it's as old as yesterday's lunch. I don't care. It's absolutely beautiful. And I said, how much is it? And she said, £6. And I thought, this is extraordinary. And she said, oh, she's a very sweet dealer. And she turned herself inside out with embarrassment. And she said, oh, it's very, very AF, for those who don't know, on a ticket means as found. And she said, you must look at the bottom. So I turned it over, and at the bottom you can see there's a slightly classic picture of buildings and ships. And you can also see that the enamel work is completely and utterly broken. And this is a Staffordshire Bilston bonbonniere. And what you would have done is you would have put little breath fresheners in there, the equivalent of 18th century Tic Tacs, and you would have had this probably uh, on a table or something. And if you come to tea or something, I'd have said, Nicole, would you care for a the breast freshener, which actually sounds a little bit rude, doesn't it? But you would have offered somebody something from it. And it has got damage. It's got a bit of a bash here. But a toad bonbonniere for £6. I had an endorphin high for the entire weekend because I was so thrilled with it. And this is one of my all-time favourite purchases. It's
Wow.
lovely. Now, damaged, what's it worth damaged? I'd probably, if I wanted to sell it, I don't know, it might be worth £150 because it's so charming. Were it perfect, I wouldn't be able to afford it now, and I wouldn't have been able to have afforded it 20 years ago. And it was just so exciting. And my hands, as I say, my hands just clasped round it like that. And I think you'd have had to have broken my fingers to got me to release it at that point. But I also loved the furtiveness of the other dealers around me who all went very quiet and desperately hoping, is she going to put it down? Is she going to put it?
Oh my goodness.
I had never heard of Bilston enamelware before we went to England. And then when
Mhm.
I was we were at the Ford market,
Yes.
and there were these little snuff boxes, and a gentleman was telling me about it. And I had to ask him to spell it because I was like, I don't know what that is. I have no clue, never heard of
Mhm.
it. And he told me a little bit. And then it was a fun thing to kind of research on my own to see. So it's so fun to see a different example of that.
They were also made on the continent, so you get continental boxes, and it's very difficult at this point in time to tell Staffordshire, the Bilston boxes from the Continental. And so this was a long while ago now that I bought this, and having bought it, I took it over to a dealer who's a very good friend. I've known him now and his son for 25 years, and I trusted him, and I trust him still. And I showed it to him, and because I got it like this, and I showed it to him, and he took it and he looked at it. And I remember his phrase, which was very ungrammatical, but I loved. And I said, Pete, is it Bilston? Is it Continental? And first of all, he looked at it and he sniffed, and he just went, stuff like that. What keeps you in the game, innit? Which is wonderful. So, and I knew what he meant. It keeps you in the game because it's so gorgeous. And then when I said, is it Continental or is it Bilston? And you can't tell. And he said, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. So it
Mm.
could be Continental.
No, that's such a special piece.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, do you want to see another piece?
Sure.
Yes.
Another piece of,
Of
yep,
course.
right. So something else that you asked about. So one of the things that I always say, and I mentioned it with those candlesticks, is try not to buy damaged pieces. It's all right if you're buying them cheap enough and you don't mind. So I have a collection of Staffordshire as you come in through the door in my house, and they are shepherds and shepherdesses, various sylvan bucolic people from English landscapes, and they're missing a leg or a foot or something, so they're all rather damaged. And that's all right because they're going into my collection for reference pieces and from enjoyment point of view. But this is breaking every rule in the book. I mean, it is actually so incredibly broken. It is hard to imagine how anybody's even had the patience to put it together again. It's French faience. And I have a great thing for lions. And look at that face with those eyelashes. And I saw this at Antiques Intense, and you can see there's a bit gouged out here and just broken to hell. I saw it on a dealer's stand has marvellous early pieces. And I just went nuts at the sight of this. And when I asked about it, he literally put his head in his hands and he said, oh, oh. He said, I bought it. I bought it because I just fell in love with it. And he said, I paid £100 for it. I know I shouldn't have done it. I know I paid too much money for it. And I'm just trying to get my money back at this point. And I looked at it and I said, I know. I know I shouldn't buy it. I know I'll never get my money back on it. And I gave him £100 for it because it's It's mad. It's crazy. It gives me a great deal of pleasure. It's so extraordinary. It would have been made in a mold. Very often these things were decorated by children and who were probably paid just hardly any money at all. And so you could imagine that a child has painted this. I think it's marvelous. I can't say I will if I ever come to sell it, I'll be oh, I shouldn't have bought it, but I loved it.
This makes me feel like it's okay to
Grown
follow
up
your heart sometimes. You know, there are gonna be
always.
things that they don't make financial, business, economical sense, and if you ever get to a point also where that is the only reason that you are running your business or making decisions, you've lost your
No,
heart and soul.
no,
You've
no.
lost it.
Nothing I do makes financial sense. It's very hit and miss. The rare days that I make a profit is a red letter day. It's yeah,
Well,
buy with your heart. I always buy with your heart.
sometimes I use the reasoning of, well, I'm saving it from someone else destroying it, or I'm saving it from the landfill. So I don't mind buying up a little bit just because I love it and I'll cherish it, even though it's broken or damaged or missing a leg or whatever it might be. But I'm going to give it love
Saving it
instead of
from
it.
landfill, Nicole.
Yeah.
That's really pushing the point, but good for you. Yes. Well,
We're saving the planet, okay? That's what we're doing here.
oh, I've
Anytime.
got to buy another broken piece of Staffordshire to save the planet.
It's
Yes.
really gonna make a big impact on our climate,
Yes.
okay?
Yes, it really is, isn't it?
Funny. All right. So going back to antiquing in England, is there any specific time of year that you would recommend going for certain fairs or just the climate or the weather or attractions or anything like that?
Well, it's it, not the winter. I mean, we don't have winters. Certainly in Gloucestershire and the Cotswolds, we don't have winters like you have winters. And but even so, it's not so much fun going out. I mean, I got up this morning and I was on the road at 6 o'clock and it was pitch black and it was pelting down with rain. And I know the road very well, but it was 45 minutes of utter concentration to get down to the Cornhall in Cirencester. Oh, come in the spring, come in the autumn, come in the summer. It doesn't get that hot, generally speaking. And particularly, I have a great love of May mornings. And so this morning, when I was driving down in the dark and I was making myself think, I actually counted how many Fridays I got to go before it started to get light in the morning. I think I got to 15 Fridays before I can start to see some daylight. But when I drive down on a May morning, and you've got what we call Queen Anne's lace, which is a kind
Mm,
of reed, but it's so
it's
pretty that grows
beautiful.
on the side of the verd. It's magical. It's absolutely magical. So that's the time of year. The antique fairs you can find. You just have to look up to Google antique fairs in London and all in the UK. Newark, fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing you again, but I shan't see you, Nicole, which is a shame. Yeah, Newark is the big one, and that's good fun. There's Ardingly, which is quite big. I like some of the smaller fairs. So obviously I've mentioned Antiques Intense. There is a lovely fair down in Cornwall, which is called Ennis, which is like
Mm,
the Cornish version of Antiques Intense, but it's quite a long way to go, but not by your standards in the US. So, you might be okay with that. There's another lovely one, which is Bath Decorative Fair. Jo Roberts she has a stand on the stage at Bath Decorative Fair, which always looks very lovely. I'm trying to think where else. There's another great fair in London once a month on a Sunday coming up this coming Sunday. I can't go to it this Sunday, which is the Adams Fair in the Horticultural Hall. And I'm always very happy to share knowledge of when and where fairs are. I don't go up to the north very often. And I also don't necessarily go to the grand affairs. They're lovely to go to look at. You can't always buy. So- But so Battersea Decorative Fair is a great treat to go to look at. And I think there's one in Harrogate, but I don't go quite that fun.
That's what we told people when we came back. It's like, just if you just search antique fairs and then wherever you're staying,
You'll find them.
anywhere. And it may be really small, it might be large, it might be a car boot
Yeah.
sale. And if not, like coming in February, I know that the weather is dicey. Like it could be pouring down rain because it does seem like England has very wet winters compared to here. We'll have a lot of
Yeah.
snow or it's just freezing all the time. But even if the weather's bad, you can always find antique centers to visit that are, some of them seem really big. So I'm hoping to visit Hemswell, maybe Harrison's if we get up, and some of those. It's like we'll have plenty to kind of wander around in it. Even if we don't buy a ton there, again, I learned so much by seeing things. I keep saying it over and over again, but it's like I will see something 10 times a day in England that I might see once a year in Kansas City and if I see it here, everyone is fighting over it. And so it's just a completely different environment.
Mm.
Are there any towns that you would recommend for an antique lover where if it's just like, I mean, the architecture everywhere that we've gone was gorgeous, but just you had mentioned a couple towns while we were there, and you even took us through a few of them on that Monday that we were with you.
Yeah.
If anybody is
Well,
looking for more like antique centers or just places, like quaint places to like walk around, are there any?
yes, I mean, this is all based on my personal knowledge, so there will be other places that I just don't get to.
Mhm.
So obviously, I'm enormously biased to Stow-on-the-Wold. So Stow-on-the-Wold, everybody remembers that once upon a time it had something like 60 antique shops. Well, it doesn't have 60 now, but it's got, Drew Pritchard has said of Durham House Antiques that it's the best antique centre in the, which makes me very proud. I'm very proud for the owner, Jane Finnegan. And we've got Tudor House. There's another antique. There are a couple more antique shops in the square. The other place that I like enormously is down towards the south coast is Petworth. Petworth has got a very good concentration of independent shops and about 7 or 8 really good uh, single seller shops and also a couple of centres as well. Petworth is always a treat to go to, and that's quite close to the fair at Ardingly. Did you go to Ardingly? Did we talk about Arding?
No,
Ardingly is
no.
another very good fair. I'm trying to think of another town.
I think
Leominster.
yeah.
Leominster,
Lem-
which is spelt Leominster, confusingly to American friends. Leominster's got a really, really good centre, which a friend of mine, Ben, owns, and he's an exhibitor at Antiques Intense. And I've just blanked. Ben and Steph own that, and there are other antique centres in Leominster and antique shops. Desperately trying to think where else. I think over towards Suffolk. I keep meaning to go over there. I think Holt has got some antique shops. There's a dealer I know over there who's got a shop called the Spotted Tiger, and I think there are other shops around near her. And that's probably as far as I can go at the moment. I have to think about
Oh,
that a bit
that's
more.
good. I'm going to have to
No, I'm
rewatch
gonna
this later and take
yes.
notes down
Take notes.
for like other
Yes.
places to visit.
Yeah, when we're editing it, we're definitely going to be writing down notes because some of these places we're familiar with, but again, it's just you can't go 5 minutes without tripping over an antique shop, I don't think, which is great. That's why we love coming.
Yeah, I'm already in planning stages for my next trip.
Yeah,
Hopefully in the spring, we'll see. But Sean has already said, I'm
fantastic.
definitely coming because you're not going to be able to lug that suitcase up the stairs if we get another rental and you're not going to be able to drive. So I'll drive you around.
Great.
Like, that's
That's really,
perfect.
really good. Can I ask you two what is the one thing that you both bought from the trip to England that is your absolute keeper that you're going to look at and it's going to have all those memories associated with
Man, picking one thing is so hard.
one thing? One
So
thing.
I mean, I will say that there is that pair of barley twist candlestick holders that we got out of the case at Station Mills.
Yes.
Yes, because I have not ever seen the copper on them, and I'm a huge sucker for barley twist. Even though I know it's like so common in England, it's not so common here. But the copper and the oak together, I haven't been able to find anywhere online or anything that like matches that. And it's like, I don't even know how old it is. Maybe it's not old. It feels arts and crafts to me, but
Oh, yeah.
like I would say like 1920s, but I just love the way that it looks. And so it's hard for me to necessarily, because sometimes I do get so much into like the business mode and thinking about what I paid for things. But there are some pieces of artwork. There's one also that I got from Station Mills with this completely knackered black frame. And it's, I think, a French ocean maritime scene with a boat near a harbor. Like the oil
Um,
painting is just,
yeah.
yeah, maybe you
I
remember
remember you. Yeah, I remember you getting that. Yeah.
all crackly and just, I mean, it's not in good condition. And that's actually why I love it so much, because it's like you have been through the ringer, baby, and you still look really good. And it's just, there's something, they just grab you and you feel, I always say it's that you have this like gut, it's physical, like for you actually have a physical reaction in
Yes.
your muscles and your nervous system when something really
Oh, yeah.
hits you in the right way and you just
Yeah.
feel it. And then eventually, what's
Yeah.
amazing about having the experience is I feel like our subconscious, our sensory system is so much faster to react to something than our brain. And if it's the right piece, eventually the brain catches up and then it's like an out of body experience for me sometimes where my emotions just like, whoop, it like locks
Yeah.
onto something. And the brain will catch up with all the facts and figures and how old it is and what it is. But the emotions are just like, that's it. That has that
Mhm.
thing.
Do you know the writer Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a
Yes.
book called Blink? I think it was Blink that was about that, where he's talking about your instinct and how your instinct is, it's not witchcraft, it's not supernatural things. Your instinct is probably years of you being interested and studying a particular thing. And he had a most wonderful example of a fire chief in New York who was about to retire at about 55, because we retire people with great knowledge and expertise, probably quite early and earlier than we should. And this man he was the last week of working before he retired, and he went into a burning building with his fire crew. And he suddenly said, right, everybody out, we've got to go. And he evacuated the building. And about 30 seconds later, the building collapsed. And everybody said, oh, that was amazing. What good luck it was. And what it was, when he had the moment to think it through, he had evaluated that the fire wasn't behaving as it should do, and he recognized the instability that it was causing. But he haven't got time to stop and go, oh, well, it's this and it's that and it's that. Everybody, this is what we're doing. He just act, and that's what instinct is. So your brain, you just know, you see that piece, you recognize something in it that speaks to you, and only later can you begin to add it all.
Oh, wow.
That's why I also get a little offended, not offended at the person because I don't think that they certainly don't mean to be offensive. But when someone says, oh, you're so lucky, you always find this, that, and the other. And it's like, I understand
Hmm.
there is an element that I can't control. I cannot control what specific object shows up in front of me, but I can control whether I show up in front of the object.
Mm.
Because if I never go to England, if I never arrange the details, or if I never go to an estate sale, or if I don't discipline myself to show up for my business, discipline myself to get up at 4 a.m., to drive to the fair, to be there
Mm.
when that item, just like you were there when that Bilston box pop came out. And I
Mm.
love how you're holding it just like a child holds a frog, an actual frog.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like if you are not there, then you will never get it. And so luck, well, fortune favors the brave and the bold and all of that. But there is a great deal. What people don't see often is the years of hard work and experience and graft that we have put into placing ourselves in the path of good luck so that we
That,
can take advantage of opportunities when they
yeah.
do arrive.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I agree with it all. The only thing that I never feel, I do work, I have to do something else to make a living. So the antiques is not how I make a living, and I never see it as hard work. it never
Mm,
feels like hard work. The closest that it gets to feeling like hard work is when you've done a day at a fair, like
mm,
you saw me at
yes.
Malvern. And I love Malvern. I get lots of energy from talking to people, and it's marvelous. Packing the car is purgatory sometimes, but I've found ways to make it easy. But I never see it as being hard work, but
Mhm.
I suppose it is.
It is. And the thing is, though, I say all that, and I am also aware that I can probably sound a little resentful, I guess, of people who say that. It's like I say that, and also it doesn't feel like work. I know this is cliche, like if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in
Mhm.
your life. But I can recognize that I feel like the inflow and the outflow of energy is even for me in this business. I
Yeah,
put out a
Oh,
ton of energy into
yeah,
finding things and learning and traveling and meeting people. But I get so much energy also
I
from it.
agree.
It fills me up. And I think that's when you know that and that fluctuates obviously on days like when I'm doing things I don't necessarily enjoy that comprise a little part of the business. Like, okay, maybe I'm putting out a little more energy than I'm bringing in. But then I have something like this conversation with you and Nicole where I am just like fire
yeah,
hosing
right?
myself with I'm getting my cup filled up. And so I feel like that is when you know you're in the right line of work, even if it's not your full-time job, but like you're in the right thing is when
Yeah,
that you're constantly still getting filled up with joy and passion
yeah.
by what you're doing.
I think my favorite item that I brought home, well, there's two that come to mind. We went to a bookstore in Henley-on-Thames and I found this gorgeous leather-bound 18, I think, 80s book, and it has the most beautiful binding and the cover, and it's green. And I love green books. I love, especially this one had like an agriculture theme going. I have to get through it. I haven't like started reading or looking into it at all yet, but I know that I'm going to keep that one. And I found that the first day that we arrived, and it's beautiful. And then the second item is this, you know what, and I don't collect those, like, bread knives that have the carved handles. I buy them and I sell them in my shop and I admire them, but I don't collect them for myself. But I found this one and the handle was sticking out, and it was this beautiful floral carving. And when I pulled the handle out from a stack of, like, silverware, it had a fork, like a three-pronged fork instead of a knife, and I've never seen that wood carving
Oh,
handle on anything other than the traditional kind of like bread or the butter knife. And a couple people might be like, oh, you showed that in your reel, and I really wanted to buy that, but I think I have to keep it. I mean, my husband was even like, you need that. Because I collect all sorts of silver plate items. This one, I don't believe it's silver plated, but the handle is just phenomenal. And the fact that it's on a fork, which is a little bit more unique than the knife, and it has the floral, and I collect everything floral. So that one is on display in my hutch. It's beautiful.
that's a keeper. That's a keeper.
Mm.
Well, one of the things I think about collecting, and that's why I wanted to know what you were going to keep to have as a memory, is I view my entire house as a memory box. So wherever I look, my eye will hit on something and there will be a memory associated with it. And I love that. So just
I love
it's out of camera shot, but I'm looking, there's a jug on a shelf up there it's a modern um, ceramic maker, very beautiful. I bought it probably 30 years ago with a friend of mine, and I look at it and I think of her, and she died probably about
oh,
28 years ago. And so everywhere, and it's not, that's a sad, no, it's not a sad memory, but everywhere I look, and sometimes the things have whole conversations. I can look
Mhm.
at something and there's an entire conversation that gets played in my mind. It's just a big memory.
I love
That's exactly how I collect too. If it's something, it can't just necessarily be a really pretty picture or something that I enjoy aesthetically. Normally, the things I keep I've bought from specific dealers I want to remember or on like they're souvenirs, but they're not like tchotchkes, It's an
Mm,
actual piece that speaks to the
acceptance.
history. And it's just amazing to bring it into my story. Like it's had a previous life and it's lived with someone else. And now I've adopted it into my home and my kids get to enjoy it. And so It's just, yeah, it's so much more than just stuff. What we do, I always say it's not, it's the stuff is simply like the carrier of meaning
Mhm.
for our lives. And it's like that
Yeah,
is what makes this feel so much more significant than selling anything else.
absolutely.
All right. So I think we're going to wrap up our discussion a little bit, just touching upon some fun conversations about England. So for anybody who is listening that doesn't necessarily buy and sell antiques, you just buy, you collect, you just wanted to kind of tune in and have a chat with us, with Natasha. These are some questions for you. Oh, Natasha, where are some of your favorite locations to visit for inspiration?
For inspiration, right. There's a marvellous National Trust manor house, which is about 10 miles from me, called Snows Hill Manor. And Snows Hill Manor was the home of a man called Charles Wade, who died in 1956. And he was collecting, he got quite a lot of money, but he was collecting, in the 19 sort of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. And he bought the most extraordinary things. So he bought farm implements when people were just throwing farm implements out and burning them, but he also bought a collection of samurai armor. And it's extraordinary. And he filled his Cotswold Manor house so full, he had to move out and live in the stables.
Oh, wow.
And then he filled the stables so full. So Snows Hill Manor is marvellous. The other place that I think is absolutely fantastic is Dennis Seaver's house in Spitalfields in London. It's very tiny. You can only get in so many at a time, and you have to go round in silence. And it was actually a collection that was made by an American called Dennis Sievers, who was from California, and he came over in the 1960s thinking that he was going to find London was like the Forsyte Saga. And he bought the house in Spitalfields, which was an area where Georgian houses were being demolished crazily. And he recreated the life of a family who he called the Gervais family, based on Huguenot silk weavers who used to live in that area. And you go around in silence, and it's absolutely magical and inspirational. And it's really good that you go around in silence. You can't take photographs in the house, and you can't just chat your way around. It makes you think. So that's a great inspiration. Also in Oxford, there is a museum called the Pitt Rivers Museum. That's marvelous. It's like no other museum that I can think of in the world.
Oh, wow.
It's extraordinary, and the way that it's displayed is extraordinary. So the Pitt River. So those would be my top three inspirational tips.
Thank you. I'll have to jot those down too. This is a fun question. So, what is a must try dish or food to try when you're going over to England? Is there something that comes to mind?
I guess it would be the classic cream tea, scones, a really good cream tea with scones with cream and jam. And then there's a great debate that rages in England as to whether you put the jam on first and the cream afterwards, or the cream first and the jam afterwards. But I think a cream tea is probably a must.
I think we missed out on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I didn't. I got my sticky toffee pudding. I mean, that's like top of the dessert list that you have to try when you're in England.
Next time
That's,
you're over and you're
I
here,
know. We'll
I
do.
won't I won't make you the scones. I'll get my neighbour to make some scones, and you can have a cream tea.
Yeah, we make scones all the time. And there's a shop in Kansas City that has, I think they might have closed, but they have the Devonshire cream, which is just you can't buy that. Do you have a different kind of
Cornish
cream?
Cornish cream.
Okay. Oh,
Cornish, not really Devonshire, I don't think. Cornish cream.
Oh,
Clotted
is that
cream.
wait, clotted cream? Okay, because here they call it Devonshire cream. Like if I buy it, or they call it clotted cream or something. I've
Clotted
never heard of Cornish cream before. Okay.
No, well, it's clotted cream. I think I misspoke there because I was just thinking Devonshire. Now
Okay.
I haven't heard of Devonshire. It's clotted.
Clotted cream. Okay, I'll call it
Yeah.
that. I also made my kids a cauliflower cheese last night.
Don't
And
you have cauliflower cheese in America?
That is not a
Not
thing.
here.
Nope.
No, you're
No.
deprived. That's
I know.
terrible.
I
It's a
mean, my
wonderful thing.
son devoured it. He absolutely loved it. I have one of my favorite cookbooks is written by one of the Real Housewives of London or something. She's like a California girl, but it's called An American Girl in London. But the recipes are so good. So I make a lot of things from there. She and her British husband have a restaurant in London at some point called Bumpkin or something. I don't know. I found it years ago at the library. So she has some fun British recipes that have, it's written for an American audience. So we often cook from that and I enjoy it.
Interesting. And Natasha, do you have any advice for first timers coming to England?
Ooh, first timers. Yes, some practical tips. I have rescued my fair share of tourists coming to the Cotswolds and not realizing that we don't have a great infrastructure with buses and taxis. And so I remember a Japanese lady turning up in Durham House, some years ago now, and she was planning on getting a train back to London, not realizing that the train station was 10 miles away. And no, and particularly on a Sunday, there isn't a bus that goes, and no, there aren't taxis that you can get hold of. And so I said, well, I'll take you, I'll drive you to the train station. She had very little English, and heaven knows I've got no Japanese, but she was very sweet and very grateful. And I was doing a fair in London, the Adams Fair, earlier this year, and beaming Japanese lady turned up. And it was the same lady. She'd found me. She'd been following me on Instagram, realized I was going to this fair, and she bought me the most delicious packet of Japanese biscuits to say thank you. And I've also had it with some Americans who've gone to Snows Hill Manor, and then they'd got a taxi to take them out there, but then didn't realize how were they going to get back. And they were 15 miles away from the train station. So I put them in the car and I took them to the train station. So be aware of the fact that once you get outside London, if you're not driving, and you may not want to, you may be put off by driving on the wrong side of the road, that sometimes the infrastructure isn't as good as you might think it would.
Yeah, that's something we're going to have to tackle in February when I come with my friend, my other friend, because I'm just like, if we're going to spend time in England, if I want to start making this a regular thing, I just have to get over it and drive. Like, there's no way, like, there's really no other way to do it, but then just to jump in head first and figure it out.
Listen, the first time that I ever went to America, I had a boyfriend who was in a show on Broadway, and he didn't drive, and it was Thanksgiving, and we were going up to Martha's Vineyard, and I'd never driven an automatic car. And everybody said, oh, you'll be fine. There'll be a parking lot. You'll be able to drive around and get the hang of it and everything. No, there was a huge car that we'd seemed to have hired, and it was parked on a street in Manhattan in the rush hour. And I had no choice but to get in it with said boyfriend and drive through a Manhattan rush hour. If I can do it, you can do it.
Oh my
Phil.
goodness. That is the
That is
worst
really
spot to start.
Yeah,
in
the worst
Manhattan
spot.
during
You
rush
couldn't get
hour.
anywhere.
the worst.
Wow.
I know. I always told people though, like when I mentioned, not. That's one thing I didn't realize when we made the itinerary. We're like, oh yeah, we'll drive an hour here, hour and a half there, no problem. And we didn't take into account like the emotional trauma that some of the situations that we might be in with, like, people were saying, oh, you're driving on the opposite side of the road. I said, no, there is no opposite side of the road. There's one side of the road in these villages and these back roads and drive like
Yes,
it's
that's
so
true. Yes, there is no opposite side.
it's so narrow. And there's a lorry
Yeah.
coming at you, and there's like a 500-year-old stone wall on one side, there's a hedgerow on the other, and all of us are like sucking our breaths in as it pummels past us, as if that's going to make our
really
car
going to help
skinnier.
people just
I know. It's like
You
you
wanna
want
pull
that
a
like
Harry
Harry Potter
Potter.
moment when like the bus squishes and goes in between the two
Yes,
two
just
cars.
like, my gosh, I can't do it. I just can't make it. So,
one of the things that I was suddenly aware of was when Debbie and Dave were over, and they lived in England for 25 years, when we became great friends. But Dave was saying, and I think John Maggs as well was saying, that we talk with our lights when we're driving a car, and we do because you want to say to somebody, you go for. We are quite polite driving cars, and we flash our lights, and then we flash the lights to say thank you, and we do lots of hands up and thanks and nods, but we talk with our lights. And since they pointed that out, I've realized how much we do.
Okay, that is true. It does feel like there's a thing in Kansas City called the Midwest Nice, and it really is. It's in other parts of the country, of the Midwest, but we definitely have the Midwest Nice. Y'all don't have that in New Jersey. But I definitely got that same vibe of being in England, of just like even the road manners, of people waving each other through. I was shocked how there were some parts where like one lane was closed. And so this was over a bridge. It was a bridge with 1 3/4 lanes. They closed the one lane. So really you just have like half of a lane. And there was no one directing traffic to say like, okay, now it's this side's turn, you go, now it's and you're just kind of like that would actually would cause a road rage incident in Kansas City. But we just kind of figured it out and went, and everyone's just fine. And the guys, like, they're getting brushed by the car, because it's so narrow, and they're just, it's all fine. It's like, hey, just need to chill out and relax.
Definitely different than over here. I was like, where are all the honks? Like, nobody's using their horns. This is very strange.
Oh, not only do we not use our horns, on the very, very rare occasion I use my horn, which is probably once in every 3 years, I can't remember where it is. So I end up flashing my windscreen wipers at somebody because I really want to honk. Oh, no, I flashed my windscreen wipers.
I think I probably use mine like once a week. It's just so different. But anyway, all right. I think that about wraps up our conversation. Is there anything else you would like to tell our viewers?
Well, I just want to say to you, it's been such fun, and thank you so much for enlightening and bringing your joyous energy to a dark winter's evening. I'm looking across my kitchen, and there's just black at the windows with the rain, and so thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for agreeing to come on here. It's been a delight, a very lovely conversation, and hopefully it's only the start of many, and we'll be able to see you more in person as years go by.
That would be excellent. Excellent. And really, I shall look forward to that enormously.
And thank you to everybody who is listening or watching along. We had mentioned in the beginning that this episode was sponsored by 2 small shops. I want to do a quick shout out to them again. Laura Snyder at the Snyder Collection and Jill at Vintagey Goods. Thank you again for this. And if you're Thank you. And if you're interested in supporting our podcast and being a part of the shop shoutouts, information will be listed in the show notes through a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you to everybody who checks it out and is listening and following along on our journey with our podcast. We greatly appreciate you, and we hope you're excited for the next upcoming episode. We'll continue this in 2026 and hopefully bring you more than 1 episode a month, and we will be finding new guests and new topics to discuss and elaborate on. And if you have any suggestions or guest requests, just let us know. We're very open to all of your suggestions.
Yes, 2026 is going to be the best year ever for Shop Talk. We just absolutely love doing this.
Thank you guys so much. And thank you, Natasha, again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.